So thank y'all for coming to our first equipping event. We want to start doing these this year when we realize that we're gonna have to spend some more time in a virtual space, but to have some connection. But also, I really wanted to be able to introduce people to friends of mine that are fantastic conversation partners in different parts of the spiritual life. And but we were kind of kicking around this idea. One of the first things Jack said is, he's like, Chad, you need to get JD on here. So JD Walt is the sower in chief of Seedbed Publishing. Has a litany of other titles underneath him, but JD was my boss for 5 years. He can tell you a lot of Chad Brooks stories. JD was patient with me when I was young and rambunctious and hot-headed and all these things. And for the last 10 years, we've kept up a great relationship as he's transitioned away. I met him when he was dean of the chapel at Asbury Seminary and the vice president of community life there. And as he's transitioned to Seedbed, the publishing arm, we've kept up a good friendship. We work together on little side projects every now and then. And so it's fun. But JD, like, there's a handful of things that JD can talk a lot about. And one of them is Sabbath. And as we go into the new year, we figured this was just kind of an appropriate first conversation to have. Let's talk about Sabbath. And I'm actually preaching on Sabbath in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have to lead then with the same thing leading now. I am a horrible practitioner of Sabbath. JD is the first one to really introduce me to it in so many ways. So we're going to talk with him. We're going to let JD kind of really talk for about 30, 40 minutes. And then if you've got questions, drop them in the comment bar. And we're going to take the last 20 minutes of this time to talk about these questions and let JD interact, because he's a lot of fun. If you've not caught already, he's a lot of fun to interact with. So JD, thanks for being part of Foundry's first equipping event.
Well, I'm happy about it. I've enjoyed getting to watch Foundry from a distance, and it's been exciting. So proud of Chad and Meredith and Emma and all their good work. And I've heard about you all for a long time and loved to have seen this location that you've put together. Now you can't go back to it probably, but yeah, Chad, I've never met anybody like Chad. Have you? He's one of a kind, and in the best way. And he's a true shepherd. He loves people and he loves the Lord. And to have that in a pastor is, unfortunately, is kind of rare. So you guys are privileged, and I'm blessed to have him as a lifelong friend. So Chad, why don't you just kind of, I don't want to give a 30-minute monologue here.
Yeah, no, we'll kick this ball around some. So what, JD, what got? Yeah,
tell me I'm wrong.
So let's just kick this off, because I think so many of us have these understandings of Sabbath. I think you grew up in Arkansas. We're here in the Deep South. Like, I associate Sabbath with like the time my grandfather got me something that required batteries for my birthday, and he didn't get batteries there, and he would me go buy batteries at the gas station on Sunday, because you can't shop on Sunday. Like, yep. come at the idea of explaining what is Sabbath from just the biblical perspective, but also this practitioner perspective of Sabbath.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's so many deep things we can say about it, and there's just as many or more very practical things we can say about it. But you're right to say that it's very misunderstood. It's people have all sorts of just folk sorts of understandings of what Sabbath means. But my definition of Sabbath is a very simple one. It's the Sabbath is a 24-hour day that begins at night, and it is a gift to the human race for our good and for God's glory. Okay, that's pretty practical. 24, and all that's so important. We'll talk about it. It's a 24-hour day that begins at night. It is given by God to the human race for our good and his glory. And the first place that we see Sabbath in the Bible is the first chapter. Well, really, I guess it's the second chapter, the very early verses there, but it's in the creation. It's not called Sabbath at that point, but it says, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then God created the seventh day, and he rested from all of his work. Now, that's one of the first things we need to understand about Sabbath. God didn't rest because he was tired. God didn't need to rest. The first mistake we make in thinking about Sabbath is we think of it as like utilitarian. It's a resting up from labor and for labor. But Sabbath is sheer time given for our good and God's glory. It is a day that is set apart, that is meant for rest, to be sure, but it's not like, well, you need to rest, you need to take a day off. Sabbath is not really a day off. It's a day most on. It's a day of being fully alive. And there's a host of practices we'll talk about. But Aristotle's notion of rest is super functional. It's super utilitarian. You better rest up because you got a lot of work to do. That's more of the mentality of a slave. Sabbath is about the freedom of sons and daughters. And it's not a resting for something that's coming. It's not really even a resting from something that's been behind. It is a setting apart time to become as aware and attuned as you can possibly be to the love of God and the love of neighbor, week after week after week after week. I've got a friend who has gone to Tanzania to a remote tribe as a missionary. They did not have a written language. And she went there to translate the Bible into their language. So the first thing you have to do with an oral culture is you have to actually write down the language. And then you can begin to translate the Bible into their language. But the most interesting thing that I've learned from this friend about that culture is this is primitive, okay? They don't have a 7-day week. They don't have a sense of week at all. It's day after day after day after day, and every single day is the same. It's hard for us to fathom that, but there are cultures in the world. You see, the Bible reveals to us in the very first chapter the rhythm of 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, 6 days of creation, 1 day of recreation, if you will. And by the time Jesus comes to us, everybody's got the religious people especially have it exactly backwards. And they're getting onto him because his disciples are breaking off stalks of grain in the field, or because Jesus heals a person on the Sabbath. And at one point, he just very starkly says to him, he says, human beings weren't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for them. And that's where the distortions Chad began to reference of can't do this, you can't do that, you can't notion. It became a day of restriction, and so it gets passed down through generations, and it has a lot of negative connotations if it's even understood at all. But Sabbath is a gift of God. It's a rhythm really in the sort of cosmos, in the universe. It's woven into our lives, and it's how we're made to live. You see it in two places. You see it in Exodus, where God gives the 10 Commandments, is where you really first see the command. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. On it you shall do no work. For in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested. And so he says, you shall do no work, neither you nor your servants, nor your animals. Everybody is off. And it's a day that is set apart. It is a day that is completely different than the other 6 days. And this whole notion of how this is how we're made, and when we begin to live into how we're made, we become the people we were made to become. Sabbath is one of those kinds of practices. And so in that Exodus text, 6 days, God created, seventh day, God rested. We're the image bearers of God, which means we are all creative people. 6 days are given there for creation. 1 day is given to rest from creation. You get over to Deuteronomy, when the 10 Commandments are repeated again, there's a variance in the Sabbath command. It says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. On it you shall do no work. For you were slaves in Egypt, and God brought you up out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And so there you see a different reason. You see, slaves don't get a day off. Slaves don't have the freedom of the children of God. And so God is dealing with the people who've lived for 400 years in slavery, and he's commanding them. He's trying to build a complete different pattern, way of living, way of being, way of understanding themselves through Sabbath. And so it's creation, redemption. You're created in the image of God. You have become a slave because of sin, but Jesus Christ has redeemed us, and we are now the sons and daughters of God. And so it's a day every week to remember. You're remembering these massive ideas that form who we are. You're not just remembering them, you're engaging in all kinds of different practices that bring them to life.
JD, I think the thing that, and I had like a duh moment this year, but Jack, who works for us, he's not in the call tonight. We were kind of plotting some stuff out earlier, about 2 months ago, and Jack brought up the fact that that God, again, you look in Genesis 1, God does all this work. 6th day creates humanity, gives them the call to steward, to shepherd, all the stuff, all the work to do, and then immediately stops.
First thing.
It's just so antithetical to the way that we think that God it's almost like he knew the trouble we can get ourselves into, and was this reminder, the very first thing is stop.
It's a pattern of grace. Okay. Now, remember when I said Sabbath is a 24-hour day that begins at night. Well, Look in Genesis chapter 1. Each day it says, and there was evening and there was morning the first day, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. You see it every time. Evening and morning the third day. So what we're getting there, we typically think the day starts in the morning, right? We have to pry ourselves out of the bed. We have to jumpstart ourselves. Instead of good morning, God, it's good God, it's morning. Again, days, the biblical day begins at night. And what's the first thing you do at night? You go to sleep. You go to sleep, and God goes to work. God does not slumber. You actually wake up in the morning into the working of God who has worked all night long. There's manna on the field already. You didn't put it there. You didn't make it happen. You walk out and gather it. You walk into the working of God. Now, see, these are big ideas, and you can't think your way into this kind of mentality. This is why something like Sabbath is needed, because you actually have to act your way into it. You have to do things in the Christian faith. It's not a philosophy. It's a very concrete, it's mystical, but it's very concrete. And, we eat bread and drink wine together. These kinds of things, they form us, they impact us. It's spiritual, but it's very physical. It's a union of these things. So the pattern of grace, we go to bed, God goes to work. And we sleep, we wake up into what God has done in the night. One of my favorite Bible verses, and I try to say this to myself at night, right before I go to sleep. It's in the Psalms. I can't remember, maybe it's chapter 16, but it says, I will bless the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. That I just have this imagination that God is sorting my brain in the middle of the night. He's reconciling thoughts. He's working in my mind. He's integrating things that happened in the day. He's cleansing. Even at night, he's working. And so the way so what you have, and what Chad has identified, is Sabbath gets us into the rhythm of what I call creation weeks. Genesis 1, 6 days and 1 day. And then by getting into that rhythm of creation weeks, the Sabbath is the reset where you get back in touch with creation days. Night, there was evening, there was morning, there was evening, there was morning. This is how we're made. This is how life was meant to be. And so that's why the Jewish people to this very day, Sabbath starts at sundown on Friday night. And, their Sabbath is the Saturday. But it properly begins at sundown. And so if you keep doing that over a sustained period of time, this begins to sort of form your sense of things. And, we all wind up jumping in and doing these kinds of things. We'll do them for a while. We'll fall away from them. But you can always pick it back up. You can always jump back in. You can always get back in the rhythm. Because the brokenness and the fallenness of the world and of life will pull us out constantly. And so we have to have mercy on ourselves. It's not a performance. Um, I don't even want to call it a practice. I've begun to think about, for a long time, I thought about spiritual practices, which is a good thing. But really, this isn't about practicing. This is about playing. This is about playing the game, playing on the field. Yeah, we need to practice. We need to get the motions down. We need to understand how it works. But when you start keeping Sabbath, you're not practicing. You're playing. You're in the game. You're doing it. And I think one of Chad's whole points of these sessions that he's starting here with these online things is to help people like understand the practice and learn the movements and the motions of it. But this is so you can play the real game that you're made to play, life.
Hey, JD, I think that kind of takes us into the next part of this is, like what's at stake with Sabbath? Because I mean, we see Sabbath keeping as this ancillary thing. I reckon that it's for the amount of energy it gets in the story of God and His people and in Scripture, like we really don't pay that much attention to it. We've got this day off mentality. You'll hear a lot about rest and self-care and that language, and that's even wrapped its way into spiritual language so much. But like that's not Sabbath.
Yeah.
And that like what's at stake in our life of a disciple of following Sabbath or not following Sabbath?
Well, so number one, I mean, the very first word of the command is remember. Remember. Okay. Now think about what that word itself says, remember. What's the opposite of remember? Is it forget? No, it's dismember. Okay? It's to pull something apart. To remember something is to put it back together. You're remembering. You're putting the thing back together. And the whole thing, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Holy doesn't mean religious. See, that's the other way it's gotten distorted. It's like, remember the Sabbath and keep it fiercely religious, right? No, keep it holy. Keep it set apart. Keep it in a way that is distinctive from all the other days. You're creating a space that just by the sheer doing of it, you are remembering that you're created. You are made by God. He saw you in your mother's womb. He saw you in the secret place. He knit you together. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, imagine just really remembering that every single week. And then 2, remember that you are redeemed. You have been sought after. You have been bought with a price. You have been chosen. You are in the process of being restored, renewed, made new, a new creation, made whole. The darkness is becoming light in your life. The death is becoming life. The brokenness is becoming whole. Remember, God, the one who began a good work in you, is being faithful to bring it to completion. These are the two biggest ideas in the universe. We are created by God and we're redeemed by God. And so there's this sense in which Sabbath, to remember the Sabbath, is to create space where those two massive truths can become more than truths, where they can actually get inside of us in our sort of just walking around, eating, drinking, fellowshipping life. And again, it's a week after week after one week. It's okay. I think about practices like this, like putting money in the bank in a compounding interest bearing account. You know how that works. You just start suckholing money away in an account, and you just keep doing it with a regularity. Here it goes, and you kind of forget about it. You're just doing it, and first couple of years, it's like, well, doesn't seem to be growing that much. 10 years in, you're like, what happened? I've got a lot more money than I've put into this thing. 30 years, 50 years, you're like, I'm rich. And it's the compounding dynamics of it. It's the cumulative effect of doing it. You know, it's like, what do people say? You are what you do every day. That's who you are. You are what you do every week. And things like fasting, things like praying, things like Sabbath keeping, things like secret giving, those are the things that make you a totally different kind of person by the cumulative effect of doing them. This is a wisdom of God to teach us these things. And Sabbath is kind of one of those super practices that brings a lot of things together. Like I said, the rhythm, the pattern of a creation week, the pattern of a creation day. You won't get this the first time or the second time or the third time that the day begins at night. But like the 20th time, all of a sudden, your sensibility is changing, and you're beginning to think like this. You're beginning to think, I'm going to go to bed, and God's going to go to work, and He's got this. And think about what that does to anxiety. The living in the reality and the realization of these kind of patterns. So what do you do on Sabbath? 4 things, 4 practices. Ceasing. Okay, Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. It means to cease. Okay, to stop. That's the first practice, ceasing. Number 2, resting. I'll talk about each of these. Number 3, feasting. And number 4, embracing. Ceasing, resting, feasting, embracing. That sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, think about that. Like one day a week, every week. I can go through 10 years of weekends and never get that. You can go through 1 week of a Sabbath and get it all. I'm not knocking weekends, but weekends is not a biblical idea. It's a sort of European American idea. It's not a bad idea, but it's not the same as Sabbath. Sabbath is a reorienting, come back. Okay, let's come back around. Let's come back to it. We just have sort of limped our way through that week. Let's get to Sabbath and reorient, and let's do it again, and let's do it again, and let's do it again. It's that long obedience in the same direction. So ceasing. Okay, so I believe, and it's proven out with history, you need a ritual beginning to Sabbath. The Jewish people, they have a candlelighting ceremony, and they will, first off, they prepare for Sabbath. They go through, they take care of everything that needs to be taken care of in order to have a real Sabbath celebration. But when the time comes, it's like there's a line that you draw on the ground and you step across it and you're entering into a different kind of space. It needs to be marked. When my children were little is when I started keeping Sabbath. And we got this little oil lamp, the kind that has a wick that pulls up through the little round stone. It's a simple little thing. And we wrote this prayer, and oftentimes we would do it at dinner, sometimes we would do it at bedtime. But we would get the lamp, and the kids would fight over who lights it. So it was super peaceful. And we would say this prayer. We just this little poem that kind of brings in these practices. We would say, God, give us your peace and cause us to rest. We cease from our labor. We seek for your best. Embracing each other, we walk in your ways. We thank you for giving this new Sabbath day. And so, it's dark outside, and the kids, you just start learning it from doing it week after week. We light the candle, and that's it. And you are now in Sabbath. But that's the mark of, like, we're going to cease from all that came before, and now we're entering into a different kind of space as a family or as a community. And then resting. It's interesting to get back to that text. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. On it you shall do no work. All the emphasis over all the centuries has gone into the interpretation of what the word work means. This is why when you're like reading the New Testament, they'll say something like, and they took a Sabbath day walk. Okay, they had it legislated just how far you could actually walk before it was considered work. The rubbing of the grain together in the hands to get the grain out, work. You go to Jerusalem to this day on the Sabbath, you go in a store that may happen to be open, and you get on an elevator, and it's programmed for the doors to open on every floor, because pushing the button is considered work.
JD, this year when we were in Israel, they will not make you coffee on Sabbath.
No, it's pure legal.
The machines, like the automatic button that you hit, and it makes coffee automatically for you. That machine's working, so you got instant coffee on Sabbath.
But so see, it's the wrong emphasis. The emphasis is, of course, is on holy. Keep it holy. Keep it whole. Keep it real. Keep it beautiful. Keep it pure. But resting. This is where a lot of legalism comes in, because one person's idea of rest is another person's idea of rigor. Like, for me, if you told me that I had to mow the yard on Sabbath, that's the last thing I want to do. But some guys just like to get on their riding lawnmower and just mindlessly mow the yard. It's a form of rest. The bottom line is to say no to-do lists. because what will often happen to us is we'll put our sort of professional or work to-do list aside only to pick up our home to-do list. And it's just another form, another list of work. You actually want to do things like, this is very hard to do now, but you want to hide your phone. You want to hide things that even remind you of work, things that draw your attention to what you have to do. Hide your briefcase. Keep it out of sight. You don't want your mind to be drawn to work. You got 6 days to get things done. 6 days to be the productive pastor. You got 6 days to get the homework done, to get the work done, to get whatever you got to get done. And you know what? You won't get it all done ever. And if you work that 7th day, you still won't get it all done ever. And so that's the whole nature of ceasing and resting. What is it that gives you rest? A nap? Sure. Sleeping late? Absolutely. Taking a walk? Just waste your time. It's very hard for people because what Sabbath will reveal about us is just how much slavery is in us. You know what else it'll reveal about us? It's just how much our own sense of worth and value as a person is tied to our output, our production, our performance. It's so deep. And the only way to begin unraveling that is to cease, to rest, to literally force yourself to go against your broken sort of sense of who I am, and that I've got to be producing, I've got to be helping, I've got to be doing something. Sabbath is surely for the glory of God and the good of human beings. And it's freedom. It's about freedom. And so that's ceasing, resting, feasting. Now, this brings in another really highly neglected but super important practice is fasting. Do you know that without fasting, there's no feasting? There's just eating more. Our idea of feasting is just more. And by fasting is a way of approaching the week. It's a way of saying, you know what? For this week, for these 6 days, I'm going to eat to live. But you know what? On the Sabbath day, I'm going to Chad's house. We're going to get the Komodo dragon grill out. And we're going to live to eat. We're going to eat foods that we don't normally eat. We're going to sort of feast. And we're going to enjoy it guilt-free. And so it really does challenge us to think, well, what about fasting? And there's fasting. Fasting is a spectrum from, like I said, from a day where you don't eat anything to just a different mentality of like, I'm not going to really give a lot of focus to where I'm going to go to lunch today and what I'm going to have. And then, you know, we all know how it is. It's like once you get done with lunch, you're thinking about what's for supper. And it's never, 20, 30 pounds later, you're like, thanks. But you see, Sabbath is a rhythm, feasting. And I'm still trying to groove this into my own life. I've started intermittent fasting. And, the other day I was just I found myself thinking, well, I can't really count this as fasting because I'm trying to lose weight. And it's just like the Lord just sort of shook me and said, do you think that your body doesn't belong to me? That this is some sort of just spiritual thing? Your body is my temple. So I care about the whole thing. And I don't want you to be fixated on your weight, but I want you to be healthy. And so I just said, okay, Lord, well, this intermittent fasting is for you. And I'm going to fast 16 hours a day. I'm going to eat 8 hours a day. And when I eat in those 8 hours a day, I'm just not focused on it. I'm not worried about it. I'm just trying to sustain myself with healthy food that may not be, what I would love, but that one day I'm going to eat what I love. And feasting is a critical part of Sabbath keeping. And then the fourth one, embracing each other, being with other people, seeing other people. It reminds me of the great greeting that you hear about, like in some parts of Africa. It's when two people meet each other, like along the road, one of them will say, Sawabona, which means, I see you. And the other person responds, Sikhona, which means, I am here. I see you. I am here. I mean, that's not how I go about it every day. It's just not on my mind. I'm like, maybe I see you. And if I see you, maybe I'm paying attention. But you see, when you begin to put this anchor down every single week, it has a way of seeping out into the rest of the week. And life is about two things, about three things, okay? It's about loving God, loving our neighbor, and loving ourselves. That is what life is about, 100%. And sin is simply the failure to do that. It's the failure of love. It's not bad behavior. I mean, it may look like bad behavior. It's not moral failure, though it may be moral failure. It's not performance. It's just the breakdown of love. And so Sabbath ultimately is about getting back in touch with that core essence and deepest longing that we all carry, to love and to be loved, to embrace each other, to embrace ourselves, to embrace God. So that's
So
pretty.
Yeah. Jay, we got a couple of questions. Jennifer Clark's popped in here a couple of times. Top one she has is, could Sabbath not be the day that we all meet to worship? Is it a communal practice or is it an individual practice? And that was kind of early on. You've kicked that ball around a little bit. But talk about that.
Yeah, I think, of course, first off, Christians have kind of conflated Sabbath with Sunday, the Lord's Day, which is fine. And so, yeah, it's a great to go to church on Sunday and to be with the body of Christ. It is a communal thing. This is why in the command is like, not your servants, not your staff, nobody works, not your animals. I mean, that's the kind of God we have that cares about the animals. Nobody works. Everybody is off duty. And now it's challenging. I mean, like, who's gonna run the church, right? who's gonna? But as a pastor, I have a whole thing where I work with pastors about how do you keep Sabbath if you're a Sabbath worker, and you just pick another day, essentially. But as you grow, even as a pastor, you learn that even what you're doing on Sunday, it's love. It's It's all for those things. But yes, it is communal. It isn't it if it's not communal, it's really not Sabbath. I think there's space for solitude, absolutely. And some of us really need that to rest, but it's it's I like to say it's deeply communal and deeply personal. So you get out of this sort of public private dichotomy, and it's both communal and it's also personal. It's not private, but um, we are who we are because of each other.
I think, JD, I know there's been a couple of comments that are in here in the thread, as like Lauren section said, it looks different for everybody. And several of us just talked about the difficulty of finding our identity in what we do. But I think that some of the things that what you've just kind of talked about for the last 50 minutes is that Sabbath is supposed to be an expansive reality, not a decreasive reality. And I think that's the struggle for so many of us is we've been in culture to think of Sabbath being this gigantic restrictive thing.
Restrictive, yeah.
Like we were talking before everybody got on here, I think John Tyson says that Sabbath is about brisket and whiskey.
Feasting.
Yeah.
Right there. No, I mean, that's right. And Jesus took that to task big time. The restrictive, legalistic notion of Sabbath keeping. He's like, that's not my program. And that's kind of our inheritance. That's why things used to be totally closed on Sunday. And you can understand. Well, what one generation's movement becomes the next generation's motions. And you constantly have to stay in touch with the actual mystery of it all. Movement comes out of mystery. And if you lose the mystery, the movement just becomes the motions. And you're just in the end, you're just going through the motions, and you're just kind of like, it becomes the rules, which is just dead religion. And you have to come back around and say, remember the Sabbath and keep it religious. No, even holy. That's another one of those words that just completely is just messed up by religiosity, when it's really what we're made for. To be holy is to be a person of a totally frail, flawed human being through whom light can radiate. That's what holiness is.
Well, we've got just a couple of minutes left. If somebody has something they want to ask or say or whatever, you can pop in. So we got JD for another 10 minutes. But just so thankful for him giving us his time tonight.
Amy, why do you find it very hard to rest when there's work to be done around you? Hey, you're on mute. Most spoken words of 2020.
I don't know. I really find that, and I was really thinking more about just being at home. I'll give you an example. I'm a speech pathologist and I work in the school system, so I have 2 weeks off at Christmas time. And of course, I spend my Thanksgiving break decorating for Christmas. And then at Christmas, when Christmas is over and Christmas Day is over, I've still got a week or more off. And I've got this Christmas tree and all the decorations around me staring me in the face that I know have to be pulled down and put up in the attic. And I feel myself wanting to get it down and put away so I can enjoy the rest of my vacation. Meanwhile, my kids are like, no, Mom, it's the day after Christmas. Don't put it up. And I'm like, it's hard for me to sit here and relax knowing all this has to be done. Yeah. And I don't know.
Well, that's again, I mean, it's like, that's not bad. But what if there was one day every week? Just, one day where
I find myself, I'm very, very good at not a 24-hour Sabbath, but about a 2-hour Sabbath,
Yes.
like Sunday nights,
Non-Sabbath.
that's not enough. But Sunday nights about 6 o'clock, I'm done. Like I'm not doing any more laundry. I'm not cooking. I'm not going to somebody's house. I've got to, work is on Monday. And so I kind of shut down and relax.
Mm-hmm.
That's not exactly a 24-hour Sabbath,
Not
but
enough. You've got to have more of that in your life. You got to have 24 hours of it. Okay, I'm just going to call it. That's a good start.
well, I'm very at the first part of the Sunday,
That's
I
the
can
idea.
grill and watch the Saints and have a good time, but I've still got, the stuff of the house hanging over my head.
Yeah. Jennifer, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I was thinking I have tended to think about more of the ceasing part, where I'm just oh, if I just got to go and not do anything, or don't anybody put anything on my agenda or anything like that. But I really love this idea of it also being feasting and being fully present,
Yeah.
being fully who I was created to be, and that means engagement, and that means engagement with the people around me, engagement with the Lord, engagement with myself, and not instead of me numbing out, I guess, I think maybe I've used Sabbath to numb out,
Mm-hmm.
So it's something to really ponder.
That's good. That whole concept of numbing out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we cope.
Yeah, it's a coping.
We all cope, and I got to where Sabbath would be like I would see it as like the finish line of the race of that week, and the rest of it's just a victory party. That day, and it's a mentality, it's identity, it just takes practicing and playing at it to get better at it. And not even making that a performance. See, that's how insidious our brokenness is we'll turn that into a performance trap. Like, did I do it right? Did I get it right this time? And but see, God doesn't. We can't transform ourselves. It's a kind of what I would call an active passivity. Okay, it's not being passive, it's actually being active, but it's being active in the sense that your work is to show up in the place, to show up in the room. And if you can get to the room, the work will be done on you. It's passive. The Bible says, be transformed, right, by the renewing of your mind. It's in that's Romans 12, and in like 2 Corinthians 4 is like, but we, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into his likeness from one degree of glory to the next. We're not doing that to ourselves. And so much religious activity and spiritual busyness, it's in the way. And so to try to get to these places, it's fascinating how God says, well, you want your appetite for me and my word and my spirit to grow. He doesn't say, well, you just gotta rev up the devotional engines. You know what he says? Stop eating. Fast. Just stop eating. You want to get really intimate with me? He's not like saying, well, just take a 24-hour, prayer closet retreat. No, just drop everything. Just stop and rest. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to the common people, and they're all just loaded down with burdens of religiosity, and he says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you weary? Come to me, you who are heavy and carrying burden, heavy laden. He says, and you'll find rest for your souls. Let's take that yoke that you're wearing off, and in its place, let's put my yoke on you, the one you're made for. You won't even feel it. It's easy. It's light. And this is how Jesus is. And I think this is how he teaches us that through, it's counterintuitive. It's a bit unconventional, but they're tested in their true ways that if we can just kind of begin to do it over time, the miracle happens. And because the real miracle is the identity work that happens in the midst of it. Marge, you got a word for us?
Well, this might sound kind of ritualistic, but I guess it's just a question I have. Like, what if I wanted to go feast with my friends at a restaurant? I mean, I'm causing someone to work then.
Well, and this is where you get into the, in the Jewish situation, it was pretty insular and they were pretty like themselves. We're living in a different, very different kind of economy and world. And I mean, Chick-fil-A, we all kind of like salute that, right? They're closed on Sunday and it makes us want them even more on Monday. But you can't, there's no end to the kinds of questions. It's a very thoughtful question you're raising, but I say go for it. Those people need jobs. They're working. They're going to get another day off probably. They're not going to work 7 days a week. People, they're on all kinds of crazy schedules. There is no way that it's all going to come back around to everything shuts down on Sunday except Chick-fil-A. It's just not going to happen. And so that is a can of worms. Where do you like to go eat with your friends?
Oh, just different places. No, don't really have one specific place.
Yeah. Well, it's better to go to a place, I think, on Sabbath with a group of friends and let people that are being paid to do this, you're going to tip them well. They're going to get their own time off than you slaving in the kitchen for hours and hours to prepare something to host people to sort of entertain them. Now, another thing though would be to say, you know what, let's just the four of us get together and let's cook together on Sabbath. That could be very life-giving. Mm-hmm. Maybe. You may just want to get out of there.
Well, JD, thank you so much for giving us your time. Y'all, thank you for
thanks for being calling on everybody. I'm not done calling on everybody.
It's your call now, JD.
It's, we're within the margin of error. It's 8:01. Anybody else got anything to share? Lauren, Pepper, Barbara, Delia?
Yeah, I mean, this was really cool. I'm kind of in a season where I'm like trying to figure out Sabbath in a different way. I've kind of moved jobs, and so figuring that out has been challenging, but this was really insightful, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Did it snow in Monroe? Y'all got some snow?
We did.
Once in a decade.
Mr. JD.
Who's that?
What was that scripture that you shared? You said when you lay your head down at night and about restoring. It made me think of, when we go to sleep, our body's job and the way God made us was to restore itself.
Right.
And so getting enough sleep is so important, but it had never really occurred to me that, I mean, I pray before I sleep, but then to think that God is working on my behalf as I sleep. I'd love to know that scripture again.
Well, I think it's, you can Google it, but I think it's in Psalm 16, I think, but it says,
Okay,
I looked it up. It's 16:7.
great. Thank you.
bless the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. Amy, do you know sometimes, this is a weird thing I believe it. I believe you can ask the Lord a question that you want an answer to before you go to bed. Last thing. Say like, Lord, I really want you to help me understand why my son is so quiet these days. Okay? I want you to help me understand that. And I'd like for you to really help me have that answer in the morning. He'll do it. Now, you need faith, but he will wake you up and you will have answers to things. Now, see, I've read secular studies on the brain, and this is the kind of stuff that people talk about. Our bodies and our minds and our brains are so sophisticated that the speaking, and I don't just have it like in my mind, I say the question out loud because it's like there's something oral about it. There's something, it's very human and physical. Our whole body hears. And God, God is amazing. He's far more present than we have any sense of. That's why we need to be awakening, wake up. Every morning, you know what scripture I say when I wake up? I've gotten in this practice. I've got this little book I wrote. I want to invite you guys to join me on the Seedbed Daily text. Y'all ever heard of that? If you hadn't, Chad's in big trouble. I write every single day, just a Bible sort of lesson. This one we're doing now is called First Word, Last Word, God's Word. Because I realized that I was getting to a place where my first word was like text messages and Facebook. And my last word was like Netflix. That was and every day you start doing that every day. That's who you are. You're Netflix and Facebook and text messaging. It's consuming. And this is good morning and good night right here. And I was convicted about a year ago. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give God the first word every day, and I want to give him the last word. It's another one of these little active passivity practices. And so in the morning, when I can kind of get enough consciousness and when I actually sort of decide I'm going to get out of bed, maybe, 18, 19 snooze bars later, you lose 10% of your energy for the day every time you hit snooze bar. So some days I start at a deficit, but I'm conscious and I say, wake up, sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Okay, which the word there, it means Christ will reveal things to you. And it's not you do this and he'll do that. No, it's he's doing that. Wake up. And so I want my ears to hear the word of God. That's Ephesians 5:14. Wake up, sleeper. And notice I don't say and get out of bed because I have a bigger problem than bed. My problem is dead. Death is all of our problem. Jesus has won over death, but death is biting back constantly. It's gravity's pulling us down. And I'm just declaring this resurrection. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. and then I get up. So that's my first word every day. And that changes sometimes to different things. But the last word, well, here's the last word lately, has been, I say to myself, this is Lamentations 3:24, Jeremiah. I love it how the Bible says things like, I say to myself. We need to be talking to ourselves. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. I'm in a waiting season in my life, and every day is not too often for me to say that to myself, because I don't want to wait. I want to escape, frankly. Anyway, we're getting to the margin of error here for Chad. He's got dessert waiting on him.
I'm just happy. Lauren sent me a text and she said he hijacked you, Chad. I said, yeah, but I'm so glad that JD's on a roll. I went to seminary, not because I wanted to go to seminary, but I went on a seminary visit with some guys that I was working with up to Asbury because I had heard about JD, and I had been reading when Asbury started this official blog. It was the very first seminary to have an official blog, and JD's office was running it. And I was talking to him. I was like, hey, listen, so can you give me a job? And he said, well, the only problem is they're all student worker jobs. So you have to go to school here. I was like, okay, well, I'll come to seminary and I can work for you. And so I decided to start a grad degree so I could get a $5.25 an hour student worker job.
$75,000 price on a $5 job.
But
you paid to work for JD.
I did. I paid. I'm still paying to work for JD. JD also will tell you that if you work for him one time, you always work for him. So
you're always on the team.
Always on the team. But I'm so glad y'all got to just.
I'm hoping I get invited to Monroe sometime.
You can come to Monroe. JD, you can come to Monroe anytime you want to come to Monroe.
I want a Communal clinic.
You want to what? Oh, okay. I can teach you to cook.
Will it turn to Funroe if JD goes?
Monroe.
Oh, it will. It'll be great. But y'all go. We drop those links in there. You know, the daily text, podcast, and email. It is. I know Pepper and Jennifer listen to it every day. I listen to it most days. It's just fantastic. Quick, like 6-7 minutes on average. Perfect length for me to get from the house to the office. And so just encourage you to think about that. We're going to start these we're going to do these every month. I got a couple things on deck that we're trying to get next month settled and situated. This will be pretty cool. But thank you all again for tuning in. JD, thanks for giving us an hour of your time. It was cool to see Sam in the background. His son's 15. I've got a picture of me and Sam when Sam's like 3. You remember that? He's drinking. He's sucking on a bottle of Ale 81, that ginger ale, sitting next to me. So, but guys, thanks so much for being part of this. This is going to get uploaded to YouTube. So if you want to share it with folks and just kind of encourage them to come in.
You did not tell me that.
Well, you want me not to upload it, JD?
I'm like, who did I talk about?
Well, guys, thank you all so much for coming into this first equipping night. Appreciate it. JD, thank you so much again.
Okay, you guys keep it Jesus, all right?
Thank you, JD.
Great.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.